So Oliver, just to get you started, this is the URL that I'm mostly going off of today. When you add a kinematic guy, you should only get a landing site. So yeah, this is like the first couple chapters of the source book. So I'll just periodically go through these and then see who shows up for it. But Oliver, I'll just be talking to you for a bit. This is some of the Illustrator files that were generated after looking at the source book. I just did screenshots of the content that seemed appropriate and brought it out to vector. Sometimes the pieces were overlapping, and like mechanically they're different components, but when you try to transcribe a design back from like a kind of like a 3D illustration back to perhaps a vector 2D layout of the object, oftentimes you have to draw all the things at the same time and then maybe diverge them into maybe like 3 different objects, 4 different objects using like groups or layers depending on what kind of program you're using. And then you can just click and drag them like coherently as individuals. But that's all in kind of like a mode where you're sketching just the geometry. It doesn't have to do with physics at all yet. Because that would be if you're like you're gonna just print out the objects and do it in the physical world. But this book, The Analysis for the 4-Bar Linkages by Rones and Nelson, it's like 1,000 drawings that could just be kind of all of them could be reproduced quite simply in AlgoDo, the program by Emil Ernerfeldt of Sweden. And this little illustration right here is a graphic that's periodically cycling through all of the drop-down tools in AlgoDo. AlgoDo is located on the desktop in software, classes. And then one of our classes is danm 135 and AlgoDo. And you can definitely open it and see all these things in real time. It kind of takes over the desktop. I don't know why. It usually works in non-windowed mode. So see if that is all right. The first tool in AlgoDo is it's kind of like the multi-tool, and depending on what kind of gestures you give to the screen, it can coherently choose between like 5 different types of tools, just depending on just kind of like an intuition. So if you have objects on the screen and you just strike them out, then it intuits that you want to destroy it. If you wanted to create a rectangle, you just draw a rectangle that's kind of blobby, and you can go ahead and just let go of the click at that point. Or you could hold down, press for a delay, and then it auto-corrects it to a perfect square or rectangle. that's kind of similar. And same thing for triangle and circle. It'll intuit after a second of inquiry. And springs are just they're kind of like a strike through the screen, but you start it on an object and you end it on an object, and then those two objects will connect. And when you open AlgoDo, it's going to be in just draw mode. Right down in the middle is the play button, and if anything is suspended or slashed, then the objects will fall apart. The chain is actually just an equation for, if you zoom in on it closely, you'll see that it's just a bunch of links, just micro links of the same principle that you could create yourself. If you made two bars and then where they overlapped, you would choose it's kind of like the rivet or the fulcrum tool, but you can, but as I said, the sketch tool in the beginning, you can just go to a crossover of the two and then just intuit a circle at the intersection, and then it'll auto create a joint. There's this other one where it's called like the coupler curve, and if you just make a spiral, like you keep circling, then it just concludes that you want a coupler curve pigment point, which is those things that will draw a streak throughout the screen as you press play, so that you get the coupler curve transform. But necessarily, you don't have to add motors to AlgoDo systems. You can just set up these rivets by making a circle or popping it with the rivet tool. I think this one right here is the rivet tool. Oh. Well. Anyway, it's the green circle right here that makes kind of like a rivet fulcrum. So a lot of the work of Johns H. Horns and Nelson was just drawing with triangles. It's always the same thing. You make a triangle and make a point there, point there, and there. And I think that's A, B, C, D. They usually just turn them in A, B, C, and then there's just variant numbers that you put in for A, B, and C. And I think G is just, I don't know if it's even represented. But for our languages in AlgoDo, the ones that Horns made thousands of are just really, like, they're maybe a class 1 or class 2, which just means it's like A minus B is greater than C minus D. And so isosceles and scaling and obtuse triangles, they all would have kind of like different bisectors. But it's pretty thorough that they just stuck with this concept that there's 4 bars. So it's not a complete like linkage overview, it's just a specific type of 4-bar linkages. Maybe just the principal ones. And I'll show you some pictures of some readouts like that. I've had trouble finding like an exact program that graphically reproduces 4-bar linkages in a kind of illustrative format. I've seen some that are done by McGraw-Hill for some of their online content for the textbooks, and it really looks like graphics that are done back 10, 20 years ago instead of something like AlgoDo. So I think AlgoDo could make a really nice 4-bar linkage analysis system. But it's not algorithmically controlled. It's something that you just have to kind of like play field interact with. But something of this complexity could be done in AlgoDo by setting up layers. You can set up collision layers. So that would be like 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 different dimensions. I think you can even set it to be dimensionless, because when we're working with those triangles in class, it's you're getting overlaps. Like every time you have a little pinion or a rivet that's like not thin, then you have like a breakdown. You can only get oscillations in a 4-bar coupler curve. You can't get full rotations as easily. But in AlgoDo, I think everything just tries to auto dimension itself, or stay on the same dimension. So when you put a rivet in things and then you have like a bisection, then if you just go to preferences, you can turn off that they can bisect, if you're lucky. So this was done in Google Sketchup, which is another program we'll be talking about soon. I have it open on this computer already. I probably opened far too many windows in it. You can see all of these are currently open. Now, just for your information, the way you find out that is you go to this URL, which is just another tree of this website I have over at Digital Art New Media. And the top one is Sketchup. You can click on that. I already opened it. I'll just double open it. Hopefully it's available. Yeah, so these 9. These are most recent works I've done. This is a worm gear that's got kind of like 3 suspended rivets through it. It's a pretty big print. If it was done on a laser cutter, this is the slice of a worm gear. This right here is kind of like the inner component. If you change, in SketchUp you can grab the rotation tool, the green, blue gyroscope, and let you see into this. For this particular worm gear, I put it in a box, because when it's suspended in a box, then it's registered. And once it's registered, when you do a 2D transform of this 3D object, then it keeps it lively, it keeps it oriented. When you go to the point where you're going to do a printout of it, if you draw your scaffolding, then everything's already set. But particularly, this is probably the original worm gear. I guess also called like a universal gear or endless gear. It's been around for a while. I'm not sure the first material that was used to make it. You can do it on a wood, on a lathe, a slow-moving lathe, if you're good enough. I think the lathe was one of the first tools ever invented. I think it had a cross pollination with the invention of the treadle. Throwing wheels are just kick wheels, just giant grinding or milling devices. You know, if you got weight of stone, and you got good carvers, you make good cylinder connected to a rod, and then you have a table up here. If you have it on your side, if you're lucky, you can have a treadle. I'm not sure when they invented the flywheel or the kind of like a frictionless ratchet, like one way. But anyway, you have a leather that is slack. You know, you have like maybe like a spring, maybe like rawhide, something that gives you like a stretch. One way I've seen it done lately was you take a sprocket from a bicycle, you put it here, one of those endless ones. That's one way. So there's a spring over here, and it just pulls this up endlessly, and just auto square, auto circle. So if you do a loop like this, it's a spring. 2 objects spring together. The spring itself doesn't have too much stuff in it. You can go into the spring's constant just by double clicking it, hopefully changing like its frequencies. So in certain physics experiments, they'll show you like how a pendulum works or how a spring works. But basically they have like a resonant frequency, which is like if you oscillate a pendulum with a small amount of motion, it'll turn into something grand. You know, as long as you're in the frequency, it'll kind of like byproduct resonate. If you're not in the frequency or you give it too much momentum, it doesn't do anything. But to suspend something, I'll press stop, and then I'll make it a square. Now if I rivet it, fixate, click on an object to weld it to the underlying object or background. So if I fixate that, okay, it just looks like I stamped it. But if I press play, it can't go anywhere. It's stuck in space. So if I put a spring on it to grab something and press play, it's not a very strong spring, I guess. Yeah, so now it's a tension spring or a loose spring. You can play with it to change what's value. But just think about like what you could do with this. My favorite thing to do is set up a motor. Just like you can rivet something, fixate. You can fixate something to the background, or you can give something a motor. So the first technical tutorial we've taken is making a car. I think they usually just make a car by connecting two things, setting up two axes, and then go into the fulcrum of the circle, which is the same as the fulcrum that you riveted it to. And then you say, like, drop down menu, give me a motor. And as soon as you do that, then you control the torque to go back and forth in that circle. And there's a drop down menu that says like how much power this motor has. And if you like disable it, then you can re-enable it so that it's any mouse or any button on your keyboard becomes almost like the video game controller, you know? Because you can make a little video game in this program, interestingly enough. You know, click and drag in, or just to reposition yourself. The ground beneath here is actually an object, which you can, you know, dissipate. You don't even need it. But the sketch tool lets you do lots of different things. You can slice things or delete things. I think there's even a way that you can cut through an object. But the grab tool lets you take things and kind of, you know, involve them in the stuff around you. So the first video game you can set up is, you know, just a bunch of clutter, and then you have kind of like a wrecking ball. The car is just two circles, square in between them, but you have to do it in the off position. You can press undo, command undo, go back one step, press off. Set up something that's impossible, a collision between two objects, you know, and in the stop mode it's okay. And then you want to rivet them, axle tool. So pop, pop. That's not a centered axle. It might not work very well. If I press play, the thing just sits there. Now I've got to find the motor tool. So right-clicked on the rivet and click motor. And here it says motor speed, motor torque, and you can say forward key, click on that and press a key, back key, click on that and press a key, brake key, none selected, so it brakes if you're not doing anything. So you know, it's a virtual space. You can click on something and then you get to its properties. So supposedly if I press play, I can act like it's a choo-choo train, you know? I didn't center these things. I think they have auto-center functions. But just pressing right and left, and I have a wonky little engine. Now the coolest tool, if I go to the Sketchup tool and draw, press stop, spacebar. If I draw a loop-de-loop, oh, I forget how to do loop-de-loop. There it is, there it is. Just lots of loops. Then press play. And that thing will now draw the position. And of course you can right click on it if you're lucky. And you change frame time, you change color, you know, you change your menu preferences. And then this thing will now be a streak that's just stuck in the ground, or stuck in the space. Now I press stop. I can make this tool again with different size circles, or make like a 4-bar linkage thing. Hey Sam. That's alright. But let me just exit that. So it took like 2 minutes to press double click on that. Let me show you how Sam, once you log in. So Algodo is a pretty fun tool. That's one of the ones we're going to learn. In the recent work of Sketchup, I was taking these from 3D Warehouse. 3D Warehouse is a cool Google-owned website. And if you think about it, it's like a replication station. It has simple mechanisms. It has almost like prefabricated houses, you know? It's just a virtual download dump site for people that have created things. One of the things I took from this and thought was needed was variations on the kind of like the dimensional punch doll. See these guys with their sockets and interconnected parts. If you think about it, if you have a decent stencil, then you can put together this one particular representation of the dragon form. Just a little bit about these particular ones. I think also it might just be a little stock material. And they were probably made in China or Bangladesh with razor blade stencils. They're called punches or dies. All you do is take a piece of steel and you just position it. And the steel is raised above, say, rubber. So like black rubber, and then the steel right inside of a back piece of wood. And then you put it through a roller, or you do a hydraulic press to it, or kind of like the lever press to it. An extruder is when you have like a socket arm for leverage, and you can just get like high torque by using kind of like a lever mechanism. Kind of like a ratcheting thing, just like when you're going climbing. You only want one way movement on your mechanisms. But anyway, when you die these, you can mass produce hundreds of these characters. The one that I particularly downloaded was from a guy, I think his name is Moss. And I think he did a fly. Sometimes they're called puzzles. This one right here looks like a real release of the same one. Like once someone dumps one of these on the internet, then people can just say that they authored it. Who knows who made it? Just someone does a re-render of it. So sometimes when they release these, you go to download model. Sure, Sketchup 7 because we're using Sketchup 8. So this is now live a 3D model. Oh yeah, and if you wanted to know, Sketchup is just located on the computer in the applications folder. The rest of our applications are located in desktop class folder, the danm135, and then these are just the 6 that they gave us, that I recommended. So Sketchup 8 is like a professional program. Just so you know, see on this website right here, if you go to the website and then you go to kinematics/kinematic.html, you go to a landing site. There's 4 pages I want to make sure everyone knows about. This is where you go, like email it to yourself. But on the syllabus I said that all you have to do is add the number and you'll get the next page. So our class lecture and everything is practically a online journal or whatever. So you just go Kinematic, and then I accidentally didn't do Kinematic 1. So here's Kinematic 2. HTML, Kinematic 3, so there's 3 of those at this time, and there will be like 10, 20, as many as there needs to be. The syllabus is available online. Forgive me if that's not spelled correctly, but if it's too small, you can make it as big as you want. I think it was like 5 pages long if you made it like a size that was kind of enjoyable to read. And the stuff for Sketchup is over here at danm Derek Sketchup Prez with 2 P's. It's kind of confusing. The first link gives you about like the 8 last works I was doing with Sketchup. The next link gives you just kind of like a jarble of 3D Warehouse in my first works from maybe winter last year. And then text 1, 3, and 4 are pretty cool. One's like Sketchup for Dummies. One's using Sketchup to do game design graphic environments, because that was something that a lot of people are into. Is as user-friendly as Sketchup is, you can still export maybe OBJ files, maybe just 3D modeling texture files that video game engines like Unity could just harness. So that's the fun thing is, like, I don't know if you have to play those shooter games, but wouldn't it be fun? And it's something you can do is you can just download the texture map for a topographical space, or just go to Google Maps and download topographical information, and then just render those as the information feed on like a 3D video game you're making. So SketchUp for Dummies. It's a PDF. I don't know. Browsers open PDFs in the window these days. And the third book after Dummies and for video game design is one about tricks. It's like the O'Reilly book. And so it'll tell you how to do multiples, how to make something, and then use it as a window on like a 6-sided building. You have to use like complex principle of just pressing Option, Once you're pressing Option, then you're involved in like doing like a second level of control, so you can like nest things. Just again, it's all about just like making a window, and then putting on like a mode for rotation and repositioning. You can do anything as you want. And then, so say you just said that, you made this one here, and then you reprinted it to go there. And then if you play your cards already, you can say, do that 7 times. And then it'll do that. It'll say, what you did is what I'm going to do 7 times. If you do your numbers right, if this is 30, and then you say, make me 6 of those, 12 of those, make me 12 of those, then you're going to get like the 12th one is going to end up exactly right there. And you have perfect symmetry. So that's when it comes in handy when you use that terminal. You make something, and then you say, okay, I'm going to put a copy of it over there. And then you did it freehand. And freehand is nothing in visual space. So you did it to like 37 degrees. But the idea is that the computer now knows you're in degree mode. And then so you just do a rough degree transition, and then you land it. You go to your terminal and say, make that better, make that 30, and then press enter. And then from there, if you do kind of like cascaded move mode, then you can do repeat after me idea, which is maybe like you go into terminal and go to X5, and you'll get 500. I know it's like the complexest thing, but let's check out SketchUp one more time. You start with the lady. I think you start with the guy in Google 7. But these are stock photos. If you go to Windows and go to Components, then you'll see all the components that are currently in play, and there's just a lady here now. In this mode, I think you even have chances to go to kind of like presets, just like a really kind of boring treasure trove of stock objects. It's in here somewhere. So you make 3D objects by extruding them. Once you have an object, it's got that cool click mode where if you press right to left, it selects it if it's involved. If you press left to right, it only selects it if you select the whole thing. So it's like exclusionary. Only completions are selected, but if you go from right to left, then it's inclusionary. See, sometimes you have to use both of them to get around 3D space. So this website, danm, ucsc.edu, down the SketchUp Pres. I took some screen caps of the 3D modeling book so that you can see that you can extrude a picture of a car by just taking, this is almost the exact same process that they use in Egyptian sculpting of the pharaoh's sand sculptures, is you just take the two X and Y planar destructive editing of the space, and then from there you just kind of chip carve, and then you slowly extract the object, and you have a texture map. But it's the kind that's just, this is a contoured like spleen curve of a surface. And yeah, it's useful for making video game scenes, or also for architectural design. There's this mode for presentations where you can go to your picture and you say, okay, this is a good scene. Now I'm going to press save, and this is layer 1. And then you say, well, this is layer 2. I want it to be over here, and I want to be zoomed in. And then, so this is layer 2. And then you set up the little, like PowerPoints inside of Google SketchUp where you like walk through a space. I can show you that sometime. I wanted to make sure you know that they've gone a little bit farther than just maquetting physical space, but like this one in particular is a functional model, and it uses like a physics plugin, so that if you downloaded the Ruby file .rb, there's like lists, maybe like 100 different, like kind of like spices you can add to Google SketchUp. And then you just press the play button in here, just like an algo do, and it'll start walking. This particular guy, I think it's the rhinoceros mode. Theo Jansen made two particular new types of linkages. One kind of looks like a crab, one kind of looks like a rhinoceros. I think they're very similar to each other though. And this drivetrain system is all about these crab walking ratios, so that the kinematic linkages just have the ability to like extend themselves. So this particular one is just going to scratch against this ground at say time 20, and it's going to push that way. And then like the second one, like say that one's at 0, one's at they're bisected on the drivetrain, 120, 240. So each one complements each other. This one wants to offer energy from like 0 to 120, and the second one is in the phase to offer energy at 120 to 240. And the last one complements in. So they oscillate in tandem. I've taken some 3D warehouse files of Theo Jansen's articles and printed them out. And we had a student in the planar structure assignment for the public sculpture class do something very similar to this guy, you know? See this, and you just think, well, I could just extract all these layers. You don't have to use a computer, you can just use stencils on cardboard. The Digital Arts Research Center, they've uploaded models of it. This is a strange little oddity. I took a Mobius strip that I downloaded from 3D Warehouse, and I tried to do a planar model of it. And you're going to need to do that, because if you're going to like laser cut this is like 20 times the work it would need to do. All it really needs to do is extract this IRL, which works out great because when you make a laser core, you end up having a hollow cavity of this object, and you also end up having all the pieces to make the original object. So why not do it? I went through compromises. Sometimes I number them, sometimes not. Sometimes it'd be obvious what the numbers were. So check it out. Who does this remind you of? It's very similar. It might be the exact same stock photo Illustrator file that some guy in China found. Happened to have a press, just got copies of these made and then sent them back to America as a kit form. I found that at the store, you know, and then found this on the internet. And it might be the exact same, you know, aura. Who knows? But when I made the printout for that mosquito, I brought it in class and said, "Well, look at this, is the future." But I think the place to go with it, as you say, I always throw in my instructions in my diptych, is just having lots of parts, and then they're all interconnectable to offer possibilities that are beyond any instruction manual of the wildest imagination. It's kind of fun to just think you're making parts and you don't really know what the machine is that they are constructing. And I just want to remind you that there's a high intertransferability of these numbers, these pictures. You can take something from SketchUp and extract it and turn it into the vector file that you need to just know what the polygons are, and maybe that could be useful in another program. It's not something that you'll probably need to do, but when I was doing algorithmic composition of pictures, the last step, and sometimes the most daring, was to transfer this giant stack of polygons to a file type called scalable vector graphic. And so I just had to write headers and make sure that the file itself was transferable as just a giant list of polygons. And I found that in the file, all it needed really, aside from just to parse and write with like the instructions, was it needed to know the length of the list. So I just made a program that said put the polygons in the right letter envelope, and then preface it with how many numbers were inside that envelope. And I don't know, I went through a process. The only other hitch I ended up with was that the program I was using to make that text transfer was unable to register certain characters, like the parenthesis sign or the backslash sign, because those are restricted, exclusive characters. In computer speak, sometimes programs need those characters exclusively for instructions rather than just be able to parse them. So I had to use another program called Text Wrangler, which you can do coding in, or you can just do mass find and replaces in it. So I just set up ampersands and how to replace them with the actual code parentheses. So you can find these parts. This might make like a really low-end tricycle. They're all online, and you might even be able to find them faster if you go into like Google image search and you just put this picture in there, and it'll say, oh, you're looking for pictures of 2D models that are planarly represented, and you just get a slew of similarities. And I have mixed feelings about this one. It's someone's concept of what it is to be human. It's to say that we are one planar outline, and then from the planar outline we follow each axis of the middle eye to the nipple to the knee. There's like one extruded side profile. So a person could be 2 lines, 3 lines. When you do a side profile of a person, we've seen this in a real material, like wood. I don't know about metal, sometimes that might be things. But to do a foldable with corrugated cardboard, forget about it. It's just going to be too tough. So there's non-corrugated cardboard, which might be just like represented by a straight line. That's how thick it is compared to corrugated cardboard, which is a mess. More like plywood. What is plywood? It's like laminate with sawdust glue, or laminate with sawdust glue. It's like a Oreo cookie. Not exactly they win a Fulbright scholarship for what it can endure. So in Illustrator, interestingly enough, they will have brushes, and some of the brushes are just a line, but there's this really cool brush called perforation. In Corel Draw and a lot of other programs that are just 2D, they'll be, as long as it's a vector line, you can tell that vector line will have a different bandwidth of perforation. And it's kind of a fun game to find out like what is the bandwidth of perforation that works best for material. I think I've got a couple more pictures that talk about that too. Here's some more constructivist sculpture. This is just kind of like freaking out with the controls. You can just pinch and poke the thing until it just turns into something different. Here's a saber-toothed tiger. You can see those big teeth. Rhino head variation. It's kind of fun to think about. It's about 15 by 3, the planar model. This one says it's a penguin. Looks kind of boring. Because sometimes the easiest average way to think about this is just to do planar models where you're always stuck in X, always stuck in Y, But if you're an artist about it, just follow Noam Gabo. His most famous work is this stuff. He makes a face out of planes that are just out of each other's dimension. Think about this face. In Google Sketchup, how many different planes is he writing on? You can think of the numbers, like 130, and then like 170, but not even that far, because like one perfect rotation is like 0 to 360, but in 3D space, anything can be it has to have 2 360s. I think you can quantify down any one of these planes to be in a space of like 2 numbers, 0 to 360 twice. You might also need one more like XY position to know something integral. But there's lots of different Cartesian systems that you could talk about with this. The one I'm talking about a little bit more is the polar one. From any point, you just give me a number from 0 to 360 to know like where I'm on this plane. And then if you do the vertical one, anywhere on this.